March 1940, Kharkiv Locomotive Factory, No. 183, Ukrainian SSR. A thin curtain of snow drifts across the vast courtyard, settling on rows of half-finished hulls and steel plates stacked like silent monuments in the pale morning light. The wind cuts through the yard with a dry, metallic hiss, carrying with it the sharp scent of oil and cold iron. Inside the main assembly shed, floodlights hum overhead as workers in heavy coats gather around a single machine. An angular, unfamiliar shape crouched on its tracks, like some armored animal waiting to be awakened. Mikhail Koshkin stands beside it, his gloved hands tucked beneath his arms for warmth. He is 44 years old, pale from long nights of work, his breath fogging as he studies the prototype before him. This is the A-34, the experimental tank that he has spent months defending against committees, generals, and skeptics. The vehicle's sides rise in steep sloping armor plates, an unorthodox choice that has earned him more ridicule than praise. The turret, rounded and compact, carries a 76.2mm L-11 gun that looks oversized compared to contemporary Soviet tanks. But Koshkin knows the truth. This is what a modern tank must be. The doors at the far end of the shed groan open. A gust of wind sweeps inside, carrying snow with it. Engineer Alexander Morozov, Koshkin's young deputy, hurries across the concrete floor. Mikhail Ilyich, the men are ready, Morozov says, adjusting his cap. His voice trembles slightly, not from fear, but from awe. Few projects in Soviet industry inspire awe in 1940. This one does. Koshkin nods and steps forward, placing a hand on the freezing steel of the hull. Then let's begin. A mechanic climbs onto the rear engine deck and pulls at the starter crank. The V2 diesel engine coughs once, twice, then roars to life with a deep, throaty vibration that rattles loose bolts along the walls. Workers instinctively step back, some shielding their faces as smoke pours from the exhaust. Koshkin doesn't move. He stands firm as the engine settles into a steady growl, his coat fluttering in the draft. This sound, this powerful, confident sound, is what he has fought to bring into existence. Morozov leans close. If the test run fails, it won't. Koshkin's answer is quiet but absolute. Outside, the snow thickens. A line of guards clears a path across the yard, waving away curious workers. The prototype's tracks bite into the snow as the driver eases it forward, the entire shed quivering under its weight. Koshkin follows beside it on foot. Every clank, every vibration, every puff of smoke is a sentence in the machine's story, and he reads each one with the intensity of a man who knows this tank may decide the fate of the Soviet Union, and perhaps his own. Speed, he calls out, raising his voice over the engine. The driver shifts gears. The A-34 lurches, then accelerates smoothly, pushing through snow that would bog down the older BT series tanks. Workers cheer from the sidelines, though they quickly quiet themselves. Soviet factories do not encourage enthusiasm. Koshkin watches the tank carve a line across the yard, the angled armor shedding snow like water off stone. The wind slaps at his face, but he doesn't blink. He remembers the meetings in Moscow, the officers who insisted tank armor should remain vertical because that's how it has always been. He remembers the arguments about diesel engines, about wide tracks, about a turret that could hold a gun strong enough to punch through anything Germany might build. He remembers the Politburo member who told him, if this fails, it will be your career, maybe more. The tank completes a wide turn and rumbles back toward him, its hull gleaming under the grey sky. For the first time in months, Koshkin allows himself a breath that is not filled with tension. Morozov approaches, unable to contain his smile. She moves beautifully. Yes, Koshkin replies, but this is only the beginning. The real test is the road to Moscow, and then Leningrad. Morozov's smile fades. He knows exactly what Koshkin means. The grueling 2,000-kilometer winter endurance march that Koshkin insisted on designing himself. A march he will join personally, driving through freezing storms despite his worsening health. A march that could make or break the future of the Red Army. In the distance, the prototype comes to a halt. Snow swirls around it, white against dark steel. The driver opens the hatch and salutes Koshkin. Comrade Chief Designer, she's ready. Koshkin nods once. The moment feels heavy, monumental, as if the snow itself pauses in mid-air to listen. This machine, this angled, diesel-powered, wide-tracked beast, is not yet called T-34, but it will be, and soon, the world will learn its name. He turns to Morozov. Prepare the team. At dawn, we start the journey. Outside, the wind howls like an omen. March 1940. Dawn, Kharkiv Locomotive Factory, 183. The sun has not yet risen, but the courtyard is already alive with movement. Lanterns sway in the wind, casting long shadows across the frost-bitten ground. Mechanics tighten the final bolts, adjust the track tension, and wipe the last streaks of oil from the hull. The A-34 stands in the center of it all, like a dark monument, carved out of steel and resolve. Koshkin pulls his coat tighter around his shoulders. His cough from the night before returns. Dry, sharp, the kind that bites deep into the lungs. He hides it behind his glove. No one needs to know how weak he's been feeling. Not today. Not when the most important test of his life is about to begin. The engine roars awake again, louder than it had the day before. Steam bursts from the exhaust as the cold air fights with the warm diesel heart inside. A second prototype, A-32, the earlier model, rattles to life beside it, together. The two tanks glow under the lantern light like twin giants, preparing to march across a white, frozen world. Morozov walks beside Koshkin, carrying a clipboard that flaps violently in the wind. The route is confirmed, yes, he says. Kharkiv to Moscow, then Leningrad, over 2,000 kilometers, roads, forests, villages, rivers, everything. Koshkin nods. If they can survive this journey, they can survive the war. Morozov hesitates. Some say we should wait for spring. The ice, the roads, your health. Koshkin stops him with a raised hand. Morozov, Germany is not waiting for spring. Neither will we. His deputy lowers his head, knowing the argument is futile. Nobody in the design bureau believes the Germans will remain friendly for long. Everyone senses something tightening in Europe, an inevitability, and Koshkin feels it more deeply than most. A small convoy gathers, support trucks, fuel carriers, a motorcycle escort, and a handful of soldiers assigned to monitor the test. Snow crunches under their boots as they take positions. The drivers climb into the tanks. Steel hatches slam shut with hollow, echoing finality. The A-34 lurches forward first. Its tracks press into the snow with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Each click of metal on metal ringing across the yard. Koshkin follows beside it, his boots slipping on the icy ground. As the tank crosses the factory's outer gate, a few workers stop what they're doing and silently salute. They know what this machine represents. They know the Soviet Union is placing its future on the line with these prototypes. The convoy leaves Kharkiv behind and rolls onto the open road. Within the first kilometre, the wind becomes a living enemy. Snow blows horizontally across the field, stinging exposed skin and forcing the motorcycle riders to lean forward with faces buried in their scarves. The sky is a hard, metallic grey, colourless, lifeless. Inside the A-34, the driver grips the controls with white knuckles. The diesel engine growls steadily, but the tank slides when it hits patches of hidden ice. Koshkin, who insists on riding atop the hull rather than sitting safely inside a truck, braces himself against the turret. Morozov shouts up to him from below, voice muffled by wind. "You'll freeze up there. Ride in the support car." "No," Koshkin answers. "If this tank fails, I will hear it first, feel it first." Morozov swears under his breath, but says no more. Hours crawl by. The convoy moves through villages of snow-covered roofs and chimneys breathing faint threads of smoke. Children run to the roadside, waving as the massive tanks thunder past. Iron beasts they have never seen before. Women pull shawls tighter. Men stare with cautious pride. After 50 kilometers, the snowfall turns heavy. Visibility drops. The road disappears beneath a white blanket. The escort motorcycle slips once, skidding sideways until a soldier catches it. The A-32 prototype begins to struggle on a steep incline, its tracks spinning helplessly. Koshkin climbs down, nearly losing his footing as wind whips his coat sideways. He signals the A-34 forward. "Pull her up," he commands. The A-34 grinds its way alongside the A-32, edges ahead, and then, slowly, steadily, its wider tracks bite into the ice. Snow sprays behind it as it digs in deeper. In a roar of engine and metal, it drags itself and the team through the slope the earlier model could not overcome. Koshkin watches with fierce satisfaction. The sloped armor, the wide tracks, the diesel engine. Every unconventional idea he fought for is proving its worth right here on a frozen road in Ukraine. Morozov stands beside him, breath clouding. She's incredible, Mikhail Ilyich. Koshkin places a hand on the tank's cold steel. This machine will defend our country. I know it. But as he speaks, another coughing fit seizes him. He bends forward, gripping the turret for support. His vision blurs for a moment. Morozov grabs his arm. Mikhail Ilyich, you need rest. At least sit inside. Koshkin shakes him off. I rest when the tank rests. Keep moving. The convoy presses on into the storm. By evening, they reach the first checkpoint, a small depot where soldiers greet them with surprise. No one expected heavy tanks to arrive in this weather. As night falls and the men gather around a small fire, Koshkin stands away from the warmth, staring at the dark silhouettes of the A-34 and A-32. Snowflakes settle on his eyelashes. His cough worsens. He knows something inside his chest is changing, growing colder than the wind itself. But he also knows this journey must continue, because the war will come, and the Soviet Union will need a miracle made of steel. March 1940. The next morning, somewhere along the Kharkiv-Moscow road, the night had been merciless. Snow hammered the convoy, until the wind itself sounded like a screaming thing, trying to tear the world apart. But by dawn, the storm calms into a pale, icy silence, leaving the landscape buried beneath a thick, unforgiving layer of white. The tanks look like frozen beasts, half emerged from hibernation, their exteriors caked in frost. Koshkin is among the first awake. He slept only in fragments, short bursts of consciousness, between bouts of coughing that echoed through the small storage shed where he and his engineers took shelter. His eyes burn with exhaustion, but his jaw is set. He steps outside into the cold. The snow crunches under his boots. With a brittle snap, breath fogs before him, rising like smoke. Morozov joins him moments later, rubbing his hands together. The engines will need warming. Fuel trucks froze overnight. It will take time. Koshkin nods, his gaze fixed on the A-34. Even under a layer of ice, the tank seems alive, a creature strong enough to carry the hopes of a nation. Start with the A-34, Koshkin says. She leads again today. Mechanics hustle into action. Torches flare. The metallic clank of wrenches and the deep hum of heaters fill the frigid air. Slowly, the diesel engine begins to thaw. Steam spills from the exhaust vents like breath from a sleeping animal, waking up. Koshkin climbs onto the hull despite the ice. His boots slip, but he steadies himself. Morozov shouts from below, "You're going to fall one day doing that. Let the driver inspect it. If the designer won't climb his own machine, who will?" Koshkin replies, forcing a thin smile. He crouches beside the turret ring, brushing away frost to ensure no cracks formed during the frozen night. His gloved hand pauses. A faint tremor runs through him. Fatigue or fever. He can't tell. But he ignores it. The convoy sets off again by mid-morning. The road north is a patchwork of ruts, ice, and places where the snow hides deep potholes. The A-32 struggles constantly. Its narrower tracks sink where the A-34 glides. Several times, soldiers attach tow cables, and each time the A-34 pulls the A-32 free with slow, unyielding strength. Word begins to spread along the convoy. This new tank is different, better, stronger. By noon, the sun briefly breaks through the clouds, illuminating a stretch of forest. The tall pines stand silent and snow-laden, their trunks forming dark pillars along the road. The convoy winds through like a metal serpent. Inside the support truck, a young soldier watches the A-34 in awe. "Comrade Sergeant, look at that thing. It eats the snow, eats it whole." His sergeant grunts. "If the Germans come, I hope they meet an army of these." Up on the hull, Koshkin overhears the comment. He closes his eyes briefly, letting the statement settle inside him like warm coal in a cold stove. Every day of this journey, every brutal kilometre, is proving what he already knew. The Soviet Union needs this machine, and it needs it soon. As the afternoon stretches on, the convoy reaches a frozen river. The bridge, a simple wooden span, groans under the weight of the first truck. The planks bend under the weight of the A-32 prototype. The escort captain shakes his head. No chance it holds both tanks, he warns. Koshkin examines the bridge. The wind tears at his coat, whipping icy grains against his cheeks. His chest aches with each breath. He coughs into his glove before answering. We go one tank at a time. A-34 first. If she crosses, we reinforce for A-32. The captain hesitates. If the bridge collapses, we lose the prototype. We lose the test. If the tank can't cross a wooden bridge, how will it cross Europe? Koshkin snaps. The A-34 rolls forward. The boards creak. Snow falls from the beams with each vibration. Halfway across, the bridge sags dangerously. Morozov grips the railing, whispering under his breath. But the A-34 continues, slow, steady, relentless. When it reaches the far bank, a cheer rises from the soldiers. Even the escort captain cracks a smile. Your monster can walk on water next, he jokes. Koshkin allows himself a rare laugh, though it ends in a painful cough. The team reinforces the bridge with logs and planks scavenged from nearby cabins. The A-32 creeps across next, vibrating violently, but somehow making it to the other side. Night approaches again. Temperatures drop sharply. The convoy stops in a tiny village. 3 wooden houses, an old barn, and a single well-frozen solid. Smoke curls from one chimney as an elderly woman watches the tanks arrive, her eyes wide. Soldiers set up camp in the barn. A fire crackles at the center, illuminating weary faces. Some rub their hands for warmth. Others stare silently at their boots. Koshkin sits away from the fire again, leaning against a support beam. His breathing is labored. Morozov kneels next to him. You need medical attention, at least warmth. Let us continue without you. Koshkin shakes his head. Morozov, if I stop now, they will say the tank is flawed because the designer lacked conviction. I must finish this. The machine must be proven. With me, not behind me. Morozov's eyes soften. He says nothing, because there is nothing to say. Outside, snow begins to fall again, quiet, steady, unstoppable. The journey continues tomorrow, and Koshkin knows his strength will not. March 1940. 2 days later, somewhere south of Tula, the wind carries the bite of deep winter as the convoy pushes forward, leaving behind a trail of churned snow and diesel smoke. The forests thin into open plains, where the horizon stretches endlessly, offering no shelter from the cold. The temperature drops so sharply that even the soldiers' eyelashes collect frost like delicate crystal threads. The A-34 leads the line again, its engine thundering across the frozen landscape with a confidence no other Soviet tank has ever displayed. Snow sprays from its wide tracks. Glistening beneath the pale sun, the A-32 follows, groaning under the strain, its engine labouring audibly through each kilometre. Inside the support truck, the driver keeps glancing in the rearview mirror. Comrade Lieutenant, the chief designer is still riding outside. The lieutenant nods, annoyed but impressed. He hasn't stepped inside once, says the tank's bumps and vibrations tell him more than reports ever could. The driver mutters, if he freezes to death, he'll finish the design. But up on the A-34's hull, Koshkin isn't thinking about himself. The cold burns through his coat, stabbing deeper each hour. But his mind stays locked on the machine beneath him. Each rumble is a sentence, each vibration, a warning, every shift of track tension. A message the tank whispers to its creator. He has designed aircraft parts, armoured cars, and experimental hulls, but never before has a machine felt so alive beneath his hands. A cough grips him again, harsher this time. He doubles over, one hand clutching the turret, the other pressed to his ribcage. Morozov climbs up beside him, gripping his arm. Mikhail Ilyich, please, inside the truck, just for an hour. Your face is blue. Koshkin forces himself upright, though his legs tremble. If the tank endures this cold, so will I. You're not made of steel. I am today. Morozov swallows his frustration. He knows he cannot win this battle. By midday, the convoy hits its most difficult terrain yet. A stretch of marshland lies ahead, frozen on the surface, but treacherous beneath. The A-32 struggles, almost immediately, its tracks sinking as the ice cracks under its weight. The escort captain rides up on horseback, shaking his head. "We need to go around this way, through the village. The marsh won't hold." Koshkin studies the land. The village detour is safer, but longer, and he knows the test must push the tanks to their limits. The A-34 goes first, straight across, slowly, no sudden turns. The captain stares at him. "You're gambling with the prototype." "I'm proving it," Koshkin replies. The A-34 crawls forward. Each meter groans under its weight. Ice cracks, snow shifts. The marsh surface trembles like thin glass. Morozov holds his breath. Soldiers grip their rifles tightly. A deep rumble echoes. The A-34 sinks, just slightly, one track dipping into a hidden pocket of mud. "Full throttle," Koshkin shouts, his voice cracking. The driver reacts instantly. The diesel engine bellows. The tracks spin, hurling mud and slush in all directions. The tank shudders, claws at the failing ice, and pulls itself free. A cheer erupts from the convoy, loud enough to scatter a flock of crows from the tree line. Even the captain lets out a low whistle. "Well, designer, your beast has legs." Koshkin doesn't smile. He leans on the turret to steady himself. Breaths shallow, chest burning. But for the first time since leaving Kharkiv, he feels a flicker of pride, strong enough to overpower the pain in his lungs. The A-32 attempts the same crossing. It collapses through the crust almost instantly. Ropes fly. Soldiers shout. The A-34 backs up and positions itself. Tow cables strain. The marsh churns violently beneath both tanks. Steam rises from their engines like battlefield smoke. The A-34 drags the A-32 out, inch by stubborn inch. When both machines finally reach solid ground, the soldiers break into applause again. They are freezing, exhausted, half miserable, but they know what they're witnessing. Something new, something better, something that might change the future. That night, they camp in an abandoned farmhouse. The roof leaks, the walls groan in the wind. Soldiers huddle around a fire, sharing scraps of bread and the last of the warm water. Outside, the tanks sit under the moonlight, massive and silent. Koshkin lies in the hayloft, shivering. Sweat and fever mix with the cold around him. Morozov kneels beside him, pushing a canteen into his hand. "You need rest, Mikhail Ilyich. The march is killing you." Koshkin takes a slow sip before speaking. "If this machine fails, our soldiers will die. Villages like this, towns like Kharkiv, Moscow, all of them." Morozov closes his eyes. "We're close to Tula. We can arrange for a doctor." Koshkin shakes his head weakly. "After Moscow, after Leningrad, then I'll see a doctor." His deputy looks at him with a mix of admiration and dread. Outside, the wind begins to howl again. The farmhouse windows rattle. Snow drifts against the hulls of the tanks, forming ghostly shapes. The journey continues tomorrow, and so does the price Koshkin pays for bringing the T-34 to life. March 1940. Approaching Tula, the convoy moves like a slow-moving steel serpent across the frozen landscape, its engines echoing through the quiet plains. Days of relentless cold have settled into the men's bones, turning every movement into a labour. Yet the A-34 at the front continues with the same steady determination, its tracks carving deep, confident paths through the snow, while the A-32 limps behind, coughing smoke like an old workhorse near collapse. Koshkin stands atop the A-34 again, though the wind cuts through his coat like knives. His fever has worsened. Sweat clings to his neck, even as frost forms on his eyebrows. Every breath rattles deep in his chest, each cough a sharp stab of pain. Morozov rides beside the tank on the escort sled, shouting over the engine. "We can stop in Tula. There's a clinic. You need help, Mikhail Ilyich." Koshkin's answer comes thin but unwavering. "The tank needs to reach Moscow. Nothing else matters." Morozov curses under his breath, but says nothing more. He knows that the machine means more to Koshkin than his own life. The road into Tula is lined with villagers bundled in thick coats, watching the monstrous shapes of steel approach. Children wave branches. Old men lean on canes, their expressions a mixture of shock and admiration. Soviet tanks are rarely seen outside military parades, and never prototypes like these. The A-34 passes them like a dark omen of the war few dare speak of. Inside the tank, the driver yells to the commander, "Comrade, the chief designer is shaking." "He can barely hold on," the commander mutters. "He built this beast with his blood. He'll ride it until he has none left." As they leave Tula behind, the terrain becomes rougher. Steep inclines, hidden ice, and patches of churned mud where the snow has melted just enough to trap a tank. The A-32 slips repeatedly, its tracks spinning helplessly. Each time, the A-34 comes to the rescue, pulling its predecessor with a patience that feels almost human. The escort captain rides up to Koshkin. "We need to rest by nightfall. The men are freezing. The support trucks are barely running." Koshkin nods weakly. "Find a barn, a stable, anything with a roof. We continue at dawn." They stop at a half-abandoned kolkhoz farm, a cluster of sagging wooden buildings and one large barn. The wind whistles through broken slats, but it is shelter. Soldiers pile inside, rubbing their hands to coax warmth back into them. Mechanics gather around the tanks, adjusting track tension, scraping ice from joints, checking the engines with lanterns swinging overhead. Koshkin leans against the A-34's turret, his breath shallow. Morozov forces him into the barn, guiding him toward a pile of hay near the stove. "You can't keep this up, Mikhail Ilyich. Your lungs sound like broken glass." Koshkin pulls away, though even that drains him. When the Germans attack, they won't wait for the weather to turn. They won't wait for doctors. Our tanks must be ready. Morozov's jaw clenches. "At this rate, you won't see Moscow." Koshkin closes his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him like gravity. "I only need to see the tank reach it. That's enough." The night is long and bitter. Snow beats against the barn roof in waves, and the cold seeps through every crack. Koshkin drifts in and out of consciousness, his breathing ragged. When morning finally dawns, pale sunlight filtering through broken boards, the men rise slowly, like figures carved from ice. The tanks, however, seem restless, steam rising from their hulls as if eager to continue. The convoy resumes its march. The landscape grows harsher the closer they come to Moscow. Frozen rivers, deep ruts carved by supply trucks, sharp turns through narrow villages, all of it tests the prototypes to their limits. But the A-34 refuses to falter. Its sloped armour sheds snow and debris. Its wide tracks grip terrain the A-32 cannot handle. Its diesel engine growls with the same power it had on the first day. Koshkin forces himself to remain atop the hull, but his vision blurs. Twice he nearly collapses. Morozov climbs up to steady him. "Please, inside the support truck, just until we reach the capital." Koshkin shakes his head, but this time the gesture is weak, barely a flicker. "If I leave the tank now, the men will think I doubt it. I must stay, even if it kills me." Morozov's face tightens. "It will, Mikhail, it will." Snow swirls around them as the A-34 pushes forward. Unstoppable, the roads widen. Telegraph poles appear more frequently. The distant hum of city life begins to emerge beneath the winter silence. They are close, very close, and as the grey outline of Moscow rises on the horizon, Koshkin grips the turret with trembling hands. His breath fogs slowly, painfully, but his eyes, weak, fevered, shining, remain fixed on the city ahead. The tank has made it this far, and he will not leave it now. March 1940. Outskirts of Moscow. Bitter wind sweeps across the horizon as the convoy crawls toward the capital. Engines coughing in the frigid air. The men are exhausted shadows of themselves, wrapped in layers of frostbitten cloth. Yet morale rises as the dark silhouette of Moscow finally emerges through the snowfall. Chimneys smoking, church domes faintly glowing beneath the pale winter sun, and the distant hum of a city preparing for a future it cannot yet imagine. Koshkin remains standing on the A-34's hull, though his body sways with each turn. His fever has climbed to a dangerous peak. Sweat freezes instantly on his skin, leaving a thin, icy sheen. Each breath wheezes from deep within his lungs. Morozov is beside him again, gripping his arm whenever the tank jolts. "Just a little more, Mikhail Ilyich. We'll be at the proving grounds soon. I'll call a doctor the moment we arrive." Koshkin shakes his head weakly. Not until the demonstration. Moscow must see her run. The convoy enters the outskirts, startling citizens who stop in the streets to stare. They are used to the old BT tanks, the T-26s, the outdated cavalry of Soviet armour. But the A-34 is something else entirely. Its sloped armour glints like a shard of black ice. Its tracks crush frozen asphalt with absolute authority. Its turret turns with smooth, mechanical confidence. Whispers ripple through the crowds. What model is that? Who designed it? Why have we never seen it before? The escort captain rides to the front and salutes Koshkin. Comrade designer, Proving Ground Command awaits your arrival. We received word senior officers will attend. Perhaps even representatives from Moscow's highest ministries. Koshkin forces a breath. Good. Let them see the future. The convoy arrives at the Kubinka Proving Grounds, a wide expanse of hardened earth. Snow piles, embankments, trenches, anti-tank obstacles, and a network of observation towers. Soldiers gather on the sidelines. Engineers from Moscow approach carrying clipboards. Their expressions a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The A-34 rolls to a stop in the centre of the field. Steam rises from its hull like smoke from a locomotive. The A-32 rattles behind it, sounding like a machine nearing its last breath. Morozov jumps down and helps Koshkin descend. Though the older man's legs nearly buckle when they hit the ground, Koshkin steadies himself on the tank's glacis plate. A group of officers approaches. Stern faces, long coats, fur hats pulled low. General Volkov steps forward, his boots crunching the snow. Comrade Koshkin, you've travelled far. We have heard everything about your unconventional ideas, diesel engine, sloped armour, wide tracks. Some in Moscow believe you've taken unnecessary risks. Koshkin straightens as best he can, though his vision swims. Comrade General, machines are not built by fear, they are built by need, and this machine, he places his trembling hand on the A-34, is what the Red Army will need soon. Volkov crosses his arms. Then show us. The driver climbs inside. The engine ignites with a thunderous roar that echoes across the proving grounds. Startling crows from nearby trees, the A-34 surges forward with surprising agility, ploughing through snowbanks taller than a man. Officers murmur among themselves as the tank accelerates, its tracks gripping the ground with unshakable stability. It climbs a steep embankment, then descends without slipping. It crosses a frozen ditch effortlessly. It races along the track at speeds no tank of its size should achieve. Morozov watches the officers' faces shift from skepticism to interest to something bordering on awe. Next comes the obstacle trench. The A-34 charges forward. Soldiers hold their breath. The tank slams into the ditch, its front dipping sharply. Then, with a deep mechanical growl, it lifts itself out again, the sloped armour shedding snow as if shrugging off the earth itself. Next, the turret test. The commander swings the 76.2mm gun across the horizon. The movement smooth and controlled, even as the tank moves over uneven ground. General Volkov narrows his eyes. Stability while firing? Yes. Comrade General, Koshkin rasps. That is the idea. The test continues for nearly an hour. Not once does the A-34 fail. Not once does it struggle. It performs like a creature born from the very ice and steel of the Soviet land. When the tank finally rolls to a stop, steam rising from its vents like breath from a victorious warhorse, the field falls silent. General Volkov steps closer to Koshkin. This machine may be the finest design the Red Army has ever seen. Morozov closes his eyes, relief washing over him. But Koshkin barely hears the praise. His breath is shallow. His knees weaken. Morozov catches him as he collapses. Mikhail Ilyich! Officers rush forward. A doctor is summoned. Soldiers lift Koshkin from the snow and carry him toward the infirmary building. His vision flickers, but he forces his eyes toward the tank one last time. The A-34 stands under the pale sun, powerful, silent, and waiting. Koshkin whispers, barely audible, "She will defend them all," and then his eyes close. March 1940. Moscow Infirmary. Kubinka Proving Grounds. The air inside the small medical building is thick with the scent of iodine, cold metal, and damp wool coats dripping melted snow onto the floor. Doctors move quickly, their boots tapping against the tiled surface as they gather around the limp figure of Mikhail Koshkin. His breathing is shallow, ragged, each inhale sounding like a saw dragged through frozen wood. Morozov stands at the foot of the bed, gloves still on, snow melting down his sleeves. "Tell me he'll recover," he demands, voice cracking. The senior doctor, a stern woman with steel grey hair tucked beneath her cap, shakes her head. "Severe pneumonia, likely from prolonged exposure. How long has he been riding in the cold?" Morozov swallows hard. Since Kharkiv, nearly 2,000 kilometers, he never stepped inside the trucks. The doctor grimaces. Then the damage is deep. He should have been treated days ago. His lungs are filled with fluid. Fever is dangerously high. Through half-opened eyes, Koshkin stirs. His hand twitches on the blanket. Morozov leans close. "Mikhail Ilyich, it's me. You're in Moscow. The A-34 passed. The officers loved it. They see its value now. You did it." Koshkin's lips move silently before a faint whisper escapes. "Not done. Leningrad. Must reach Leningrad." Morozov grips his hand. "No, the doctors say you must rest. The tank can go without you." "We'll take it. We'll finish the test." Koshkin's eyes open just slightly, glassy, unfocused, filled with the stubbornness that drove him through blizzards and frozen nights. "If I do not go, they will say I doubted. They will delay or kill the project." Morozov shakes his head fiercely. "No one will kill it. They saw everything with their own eyes. The A-34 is unstoppable. The Red Army needs it. Everyone knows." But Koshkin only closes his eyes again, breath stuttering. The doctor motions sharply. "He needs silence. Leave him. We'll do what we can." Hours pass. Outside, the proving ground returns to its usual harsh rhythm. Soldiers march, engines roar. The A-34 is pulled into a hangar for inspection, engineers swarming around it like bees around a hive. Morozov stands at the window, watching as if the tank were an extension of Koshkin's own body, a body now failing him. The escort captain walks in, removing his fur cap respectfully. "Is he?" "Still fighting," Morozov replies. "The doctors can't promise anything." The captain nods toward the tanks outside. "Word from Moscow, command. The march must continue. They want the test finished. Snow, ice, terrain, everything must be documented. Leningrad awaits." Morozov stiffens. "They expect Koshkin to go in this condition?" "No, they expect you. He named you his deputy." Morozov closes his eyes. The pressure settles on his shoulders like an iron mantle. Then he turns back toward the infirmary bed. Koshkin lies still, chest rising and falling with agonizing difficulty. Frostbite has reddened his cheeks. His hands shake, even in sleep. Morozov kneels beside him. "Mikhail Ilyich, I'll take the tank to Leningrad. But you must live to see it return." No answer comes. Only the faint whistle of strained lungs. The next dawn. Moscow is wrapped in a thick blanket of frost, the sun barely able to pierce the grey sky. The A-34 rumbles out of the hangar again, engine warming in the cold morning air. The convoy reforms, leaner this time, heavier with unspoken worry. Engineers from the ministry arrive to witness their departure. Some salute respectfully, others take notes, whispering among themselves. Morozov stands atop the A-34 now, wearing the same spot where Koshkin nearly froze days earlier. But he doesn't stand with pride. He stands with weight. The tank feels different beneath him, not because its mechanics have changed, but because its creator is no longer there to feel its heartbeat. The escort captain rides forward. "Morozov, route confirmed, northeast through Klin, then across the forests and frozen rivers toward Novgorod. If weather holds, Leningrad in a little over a week." Morozov nods. "We move, for him." The A-34 rolls forward, slower this time, its pace respectful, almost mournful. Workers, soldiers, and engineers stand along the roadside, hats off, coats drawn tight. Snow swirls around them in ghostly spirals. Some salute, others simply stare, knowing they are witnessing a moment that will one day be written into the history of Soviet armor. As the convoy leaves Moscow behind, Morozov looks once over his shoulder, toward the infirmary building where Koshkin fights for breath. He whispers into the cold air. "Hold on, Mikhail Ilyich, we will finish your journey." The smoke from the tanks drifts upward, blending into the grey sky like a vow carried by wind. The road to Leningrad begins, and with it, the final chapter of the march that would forge the T-34 into legend. March 1940, north of Moscow. The convoy pushes forward again, its engines echoing through frozen forests that stretch like endless corridors of ice and shadow. The A-34 leads with a deep mechanical growl, each rotation of its tracks biting cleanly into snow-packed roads. The A-32 trails behind, weaker with every kilometre, but still determined to follow the path its successor carves. Morozov stands on the A-34's hull, gripping the turret ring as cold wind lashes against his face. He is not Koshkin. He knows it, feels it, but he carries the weight of the tank's legacy like a silent oath. Every turn of the engine is a reminder of the man lying in a Moscow infirmary, drifting somewhere between fever and delirium. The convoy enters dense forest. Branches heavy with snow hang low over the narrow road, brushing the tanks like skeletal hands. The escort captain rides ahead, scanning for trouble. "Ice patch ahead, slow it down," Morozov signals the driver. The A-34 eases forward, its wide tracks distributing weight evenly. Even so, the surface cracks beneath it with a deep groan, threatening to swallow both tanks whole. The A-34 presses on, undeterred. The escort captain mutters in disbelief. There's no tank in the Red Army that could cross this terrain, except this one. A few kilometers later, they face a frozen river. Villagers gather at the banks, wrapped in patched coats, eyes wide as they stare at the steel giants. An old man approaches Morozov. "Son, that river eats horses. Are you sure it won't eat your machine?" Morozov forces a thin smile. "It hasn't eaten us yet." The A-34 makes the crossing. Ice groans violently, cracking under its weight. Snow sprays up like white fire as the tracks churn forward. But again, the wide track base saves it. The tank glides across with improbable grace. The A-32 hesitates, then the ice gives way. With a thunderous crack, the old prototype sinks to its belly, water swallowing half its tracks. Soldiers shout, scrambling for logs and ropes. Morozov leaps down, boots sinking into slush. "Tow line now, position the A-34. The A-34 reverses, turret rotating like an impatient animal. Chains clatter, latching onto the A-32's tow hooks. Its engine roars to life. Steam bursts from its vents as the tank pulls, slowly, painfully, as if dragging an entire continent out of the river. The ice collapses further. For a moment, it seems the A-34 might join the A-32 in the water. Morozov holds his breath. The engine growls, metallic and primal. The A-34 pulls harder, and inch by inch. The A-32 rises from the icy riverbed, water cascading from its sides. When the rescue is done, soldiers cheer with frozen voices, clapping each other's shoulders. Despite the bitter cold, one whispers, "If this tank were alive, it would have a soul." They press onward. Snow turns to sleet, sleet to rain, then back to snow again. Forest gives way to open plains, vast white fields where wind screams across the land like something ancient and angry. At night, they take shelter in abandoned farmhouses or under makeshift tarps stretched against tank hulls. Soldiers sleep in clusters for warmth. Mechanics work by lantern light, repairing frost-cracked hoses and clearing ice from the suspension. Morozov barely sleeps. He lies awake each night thinking of Koshkin, wondering if he's alive, wondering if he'll ever see the tank reach Leningrad. Before dawn on the 7th day, they encounter a blizzard. Snow falls so heavily that visibility drops to only a few meters. The world becomes a swirling, deafening storm of white. The tanks move as if blind, guided by nothing but the rumble of each other's engines. Several times, the A-34 strikes unseen obstacles. Fallen trees buried in drifts, frozen ditches hidden beneath snow. Each time, it presses on, as if refusing to let nature itself deny the completion of this journey. When the storm finally breaks, the convoy emerges onto a vast frozen plain, In the far distance, beyond forests and low hills, the faint silhouettes of factory chimneys rise into the sky. Leningrad. At the sight, soldiers straighten their backs. Mechanics lift their heads from the tools. Even the exhausted horses, pulling supply sleds, seem to walk with more purpose. Morozov stands atop the tank and exhales a breath he's carried for days. We made it. Mikhail, your tank made it. The convoy enters the outskirts of the city, startling workers who freeze mid-step at the sight of the A-34, its hull streaked with ice, its engine still howling with strength. Word spreads through the factories, through military barracks, through command posts. The prototype has arrived. It survived the impossible march. It is real. Workers rush toward the roads, touching the cold steel as the A-34 passes, as if greeting the future with their hands. The A-34 rolls into the Leningrad Kirov works, its final destination. Engineers, officers, and factory managers swarm around it, astonished at its condition after the brutal journey. Morozov remains silent as they inspect it. The machine speaks for itself. It has endured everything the world could throw at it, and it stands. It stands like a promise of what the Red Army will soon become. Late March 1940. Moscow Infirmary. Snow taps lightly against the window panes. A soft, rhythmic whisper that fills the silent room. Outside, the city carries on. Streetcars ringing, soldiers marching, factory sirens groaning through morning fog. Inside, the only sound is the strained breathing of Mikhail Koshkin. He lies motionless beneath heavy wool blankets, his chest rising and falling with difficulty. Fever glazes his skin with a sickly sheen. His hair, once neatly combed even in the chaos of the factory floor, now clings to his forehead in damp strands. Every breath sounds like it drags splinters through his lungs. The attending doctor checks his pulse, murmuring to a nurse, "He's weaker this morning. If he had come even 2 days earlier." The nurse shakes her head. "He chose the tank over himself, and that may cost him his life," the doctor replies quietly. The door creaks open. Morozov enters, boots leaving small puddles of melted snow behind him. His coat is still coated in frost from the return journey from Leningrad. He hasn't slept in more than a day. His eyes fall immediately on the bed. Koshkin looks smaller than he remembers, fragile, like the fever has consumed the man who once walked through blizzards atop a tank. Morozov moves to the bedside, voice barely above a whisper. "Mikhail Ilyich, the tank made it. She crossed everything. Rivers, ice, marshes. Officers in Leningrad praised her. They said she's the future. You did it." Koshkin's eyelids flicker. Slowly, painfully, he turns his head. His lips part, but only a faint rasp escapes. Morozov leans in. "I'm here. Tell me," Koshkin whispers, barely audible. "Report to Moscow. Don't let them change her." Morozov nods fiercely. "I won't. Everything will follow your design. The diesel engine, the sloped armor, the tracks. Everything stays." A weak smile touches Koshkin's lips. It's small, almost imperceptible, but it transforms his face for a moment, bringing back the stubborn fire that carried him through every obstacle. Then a violent cough racks his body, doubling him forward. Morozov catches him, fear gripping his chest. The doctor hurries over, placing a steadying hand on Morozov's shoulder. "Let him rest. He's too weak for long conversations." But Koshkin grips Morozov's sleeve with surprising strength. "Promise me." Morozov clasps his hand. "I promise. The T-34 will be built exactly as you intended. The country will know your name." Koshkin relaxes slightly. Though his breathing grows more shallow, his fingers loosen, his head sinks back onto the pillow. Morozov stays by the bed for hours. Nurses move quietly around them. The world outside grows darker. Snow thickens in the air, casting grey shadows across the room. Evening settles. A faint glow from a bedside lamp casts warm, fragile light over Koshkin's still form. He wakes again briefly, voice thin as thread. "Where is she?" Morozov doesn't need to ask. "In Leningrad. Mikhail, strong, ready. They will start production soon. Thousands, tens of thousands." Koshkin's breathing slows. A faint sigh escapes him. Relief. Pride. and exhaustion all entwined. The doctor approaches once more, gently checking his pulse. She looks at Morozov with a solemn expression. "If you have anything more to say it now." Morozov leans close. "The tank lives because of you, and because of you, so will our soldiers, so will our country." Koshkin's eyes open one final time. They are unfocused, drifting. But within them, a spark still glows. He whispers a single word, barely air. T-34. Then his breath stills. His chest does not rise again. The doctor lowers her head. The nurse quietly crosses herself before stepping away. Morozov remains frozen, staring at the man who gave everything, his strength, his health, his life, to create a machine that would outlive him. Snow continues falling against the window, soft and relentless. Outside, Moscow moves on. Inside, history has shifted. The next morning, a sealed telegram arrives at the Kirov works in Leningrad. Mikhail Koshkin, chief designer, Tank Bureau, died of pneumonia. March 26, 1940. The message spreads quickly through the factory floor. Workers lower their tools. Engineers bow their heads. Soldiers stand at attention beside the A-34, their caps held over their hearts. The prototype sits silent, coated in frost. But somehow it feels alive, like it understands what has been lost. Morozov stands before it, running a hand across its steel flank. "He gave his life for you. Now we must give ours to make sure you reach the battlefield." In the distance, sirens wail, smoke rises from chimneys, and the city that would one day be saved by this tank goes on with its day, unaware that a revolution in warfare has just been sealed by the death of one engineer. Summer 1941, Western Front, USSR. Dawn breaks in a pale wash of grey across a smouldering battlefield. Smoke drifts lazily through shredded tree lines. The ground is churned black by artillery fire. German infantry advance cautiously, stepping over burned-out Soviet vehicles still steaming from the night's fighting. In the distance, the metallic clatter of Panzer III engines echoes faintly. A German lieutenant raises his binoculars, scanning the tree line ahead. "Keep moving. Soviet armor is outdated. We break through before noon." His confidence is absolute. Berlin had assured them that the Red Army's tanks were obsolete, slow, weakly armored. But then a sound rolls across the plain, a deep mechanical growl, unlike anything they have heard before. Branches snap, snow and mud spray upward, and through the haze emerges a shape that no German intelligence report has prepared them for. Sloped armor glinting like a black spearhead, wide tracks chewing effortlessly through terrain that would swallow a panzer whole, a turret that seems to rotate with predatory intention. A German soldier shouts, stumbling backward. "Was ist das?" The lieutenant's jaw tightens. He lowers the binoculars in disbelief. "That is no BT series tank, sir." The T-34 surges forward, engine roaring with the same voice that once carried it across rivers, marshes, and frozen fields in the hands of its dying creator. The German panzers fire. Shells strike the T-34's sloped armor and ricochet harmlessly into the dirt. The tank does not slow. It closes the distance, its 76.2mm gun booming with a blast that shakes the earth. A Panzer III erupts in flames. Another round shatters a German anti-tank gun. Soldiers scatter. The lieutenant shouts orders, voice cracking with panic. Flank it! Aim for the tracks!" But the T-34 is already moving, a blur of steel and fury. It rolls through columns, crashes through trenches, and advances with relentless momentum. A machine born from one man's stubborn defiance now meets the world exactly as he intended. Unstoppable. Word spreads through German ranks within hours. A new tank, a Soviet tank, a tank that should not exist, a tank that violates every assumption of the Wehrmacht's armoured doctrine. Reports flood headquarters. Shells bounce off, too fast, crosses terrain no other tank can. Our guns can't penetrate it except from point-blank range. Panic grows. For the first time since the invasion began, German armour officers whisper a word they had not used before. Fear. At Moscow's Tank Bureau, Morozov receives the first field reports. He stands beside the original A-34 prototype, now returned to Kharkiv for study. Its steel scarred from testing, but still as formidable as the day it rolled into Leningrad. He rests his hand on its cold surface, remembering Koshkin's final whisper. T-34. Engineers gather around him. It worked, Comrade Morozov. The sloped armour, exactly as Koshkin predicted. The Germans are stunned, another adds. Reports say their Panzer III and IV struggle to even scratch the hull. And the mobility? Our crews say it drives through swamps like a tractor. Morozov nods slowly. Then we keep building, faster than ever. His design must flood the front. Production surges. Factories in Kharkiv, Stalingrad, Gorky, Nizhny Tagil, and Leningrad roar to life day and night. Sparks fly from welding torches. Women and men line assembly belts. Columns of fresh T-34s roll off production floors like steel waves, their engines growling in unison. Wartime shortages force simplifications. Fewer machining steps, rougher welds, cheaper components. But Koshkin's core principles remain untouched. Diesel engine, sloped armour, wide tracks, rugged suspension. A gun that terrifies enemy crews. As thousands of T-34s pour toward the front, German reports grow desperate. Our shells ricochet. Their tanks appear everywhere. Mud does not stop them. We underestimated Soviet industry. Meanwhile, Soviet tankers speak of the T-34 with reverence. She takes hits and keeps going. She climbs hills no other tank can. She gets us home alive, and in every whispered praise, there is a shadow of the man who never lived to see the tank's legend unfold. Late one night, Morozov enters the design office. Closing the door behind him, he sets a small photograph on the drafting table. Koshkin, standing beside the A-34 in Kharkiv, snow on his coat, pride in his eyes. Morozov whispers, "You gave them a miracle, Mikhail, and the world will know." He signs the production order with firm, unshaken hands. T-34, full deployment authorization. By 1943, the tank Koshkin died for becomes the backbone of Soviet armoured forces. By 1944, it roars across Eastern Europe like a thunderstorm of steel, and by 1945, when the Red Army marches into Berlin, T-34s lead the way, climbing over rubble, smashing through barricades, and carving their tracks into the heart of the Third Reich. The tank built by a man who sacrificed everything becomes the machine that breaks the back of Nazi Germany. Its silhouette becomes a symbol of resistance, survival, and victory. Its design influences every major tank built after the war. Its legacy becomes immortal, and history remembers the truth. One engineer, one idea, one tank. The T-34 changed the war forever.